that this version of WhatsApp has come out of date as of 13 May 2021. Tap download to get the latest version. But she says that it's been refusing to update. So is this exactly what we're expecting to see, where all of us are going to receive a notice to say, update or install WhatsApp, and then as part of that is going to be saying accept or not?
Yeah, I think they're using technology. Always release a new version that if you didn't check the privacy policy, if you didn't say yes to the privacy policy, then you can have access to it. So that's basically what's going to happen. I don't think it's right. I must admit I'm not a big fan of Facebook as a company because one of its privacy culture, and then number two, we also have the scary thing is the first day Facebook posted a status. I don't know that you guys saw this. They posted a status, I think in March or February. So if you go on your WhatsApp status, the first thing that showed up was, we're changing our privacy. And you're like, oh my God, who is this texting me? Like, it's so intrusive, Yeah. And if we think about elections, we've seen the role of Facebook as a company in different countries. Let's give an example for the US. In 2016, if you went on your Facebook newsfeed, what I see on my feed is not what you see. If you're a Democrat, you see your friends saying, I don't feel like voting, I'm not going, they'll be doing a barbecue or something. And so there was a general wariness about going out to vote. But if you are a Republican, your newsfeed would show you that your friends are going out to vote, we are losing, guys, we must vote. And so the entire thing, the play that Cambridge Analytica played on us, with the blessing of Facebook, just means that this can happen on WhatsApp. And they have been clear about location data within the privacy policy. They indicate that they won't track your location if you don't share it. For example, if somebody tells you, and we say this a lot, maybe Friday evening or Sunday, drop pin. And so you'll drop somebody a pin where you are at and they can find you, right? So one of the things that you must...
You're going to do that.
Yeah, please don't do that. Don't just drop people your location. But even if you don't do that, WhatsApp says that by having your phone number and your behavior, they will be able to indicate an estimation of exactly where you are at. And we do this a lot. We put on our location using Uber, and you're using this other platform to maybe hail a cab or whatever it is. So I think imagining what Facebook can do with WhatsApp data, and WhatsApp data is very accurate. It's not like other social media platforms. It's your phone number. It's you texting somebody quickly and saying, here's the document. So it's you working with your colleagues, and people have WhatsApp groups for their work, their colleagues. You're sending a quick document. What can Facebook do with that data? Of course, they have access to it now already, but they're making this just a bit more official that, now we are going to access this data in this way. I think that is what should scare us. In an economy where governments can go rogue, we have dictatorship in different countries, especially in the global south. I think that should really concern us.
I'm gonna bring Demas into this conversation now. Demas, so we've seen what the new terms and conditions say, especially with regard to biasharas. If I talk to a business, then it is not encrypted, and if I share my location, then WhatsApp is going to be able to know it. And already they can be able to tell what my behavior is like, so that they can be able to share it with the people. Now, I don't know, did you see anything within the terms and conditions that says that they can share this data with third parties, or how third parties can benefit from our data? Esther Peruko on the chat reminded us that Cambridge Analytica was active in Kenyan elections as well, and they have been seen to be involved with Facebook. Can Facebook take our WhatsApp data and share it with Cambridge Analytica? Is that something that we should worry about? And then the other thing that I'm hoping that we can go into a little bit now is, what, if anything, can we do about it?
Thank you for this opportunity to have this discussion. And also like to thank Linda and Thomas for those insights they've given us. So currently, WhatsApp collects about 15 data sets about our metadata and shares it in Facebook servers. That means it collects data, certain data such as location, things like that. they deny, or they say that they do not collect end-to-end encrypted messages, so from person to person. But the thing is that in doing what they've done in giving us this deal where we either take it or leave it, it also kind of exposes these issues of power dynamics between these tech companies and countries, especially countries in the global south. They have had discussions with the European Union under GDPR, and have agreed that certain kinds of messages will not be shared. Whereas for us, I think first of all, we are still setting up our laws, but in terms of the power to bite, we are way behind. In Europe, there have been litigations against Facebook, especially the parent company. There have been special laws passed in Germany on issues such as Facebook and the duties of the platform in terms of dealing with certain kinds of speech. But these discussions are not had with us Africans. So there is that power dynamic that we are faced with. But even if you look at Facebook itself, in terms of how it operates, there's evidence that that Facebook, in even curating its data or what people discuss, that a white male person would have more levity to discuss matters, whereas a black woman or even a black person would not really, their user content or their discussions would more easily be removed from the platform. So even in terms of respecting freedom of speech itself, it is problematic. And now we're seeing that even the right of privacy is problematic. The surveillance-based business model that Facebook employs has proven to be very profitable for them, whereby they're able to aggregate data, especially metadata about you, and package it and sell it to different marketers. So it is no wonder that that they would want to to expand the data that they would be collecting from people, especially through WhatsApp. And WhatsApp has a very big footprint in the global south, Latin America, I think India, and Africa.
Can I jump in here, Demas, just a minute and ask you?
Yeah.
Isn't it a victimless crime in the sense that, yes, they take our data, aggregate it, and sell it to somebody else, but it doesn't really affect me as Alcags, being here and just going about my business. How does it harm me?
It does affect you and it harms you because, for example, what Linda had alluded to in terms of Cambridge Analytica and what was happening in the US elections, it is that with that data, they can be able to manipulate the way you think. You understand? Yeah. So they can tell from your ethnic background, your orientation, your political leanings, and other indicators that you might be more interested in certain stories. And they will tend to now only expose you to certain kinds of stories that will actually change your worldview and change how you vote. How certain people in the US decided to do that insurrection that they tried to do was because they actually believed in what they were doing. And they got to believe this because they were in an echo chamber of information, mostly binned on Facebook and other similar platforms, where you only get information that is actually tailor-made for you, and it leaves you exposed. It leaves you very distant from reality. I mean, you will not be having debates about pertinent issues, hearing what the other side had to say. You're only listening to what your tribe or your clan is saying. that thereby making you more extreme, making you more convinced in your own convictions. Whereas in the real world, other things are happening and other discussions are happening. So it is
Isn't
not
that
victim.
said to be
It is not
true?
victimless. Yeah.
Isn't that going to be said to be true
Yeah.
for you know, this is what I'm asking, and I don't know if you and Tom can tag team here to help me understand this, because I'm struggling to understand something here.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, it's true that they can be able to put me in an echo chamber where I'm manipulated because of the fact that I'm talking to my kind of people.
Mm-hmm.
But isn't that kind of true even offline, in the sense that if I live and I interact only with Demas and Tom and just a couple of other people here, then I wouldn't essentially be seeing, you know, the views from anyone else. So if, for example, I'm Cuk and I only interact with Cuks, I do business with Cuks, I buy things from Cuks. So my interaction with other tribes is very minimal. Then, you know, I become in the same sort of echo chamber. So and on Facebook, I'm connected to my friends. So the stories I hear are things that my friends share. So at what point does it harm me? And I'm trying to really break it down so that if somebody else is here and they haven't they experience Facebook at a very peripheral level, they need to sort of be aware of this. And so I'm hoping that you and Tom can break this down in very fun, clear terms.
So I think there are two harms. There's one harm that goes to society, and the one that goes to actually your access to information, freedom of expression, and privacy. Because they have so many data sets about you, where you go, who you talk to, what you buy, what time you do your activities, they are able to surgically target you for certain things. For example, Cambridge Analytica was able to target messaging based on your ethnic and political beliefs. In the outside world, that is not quite as easy and as large scale as what was able to happen, or what is able to happen under the digital age. I don't know, Thomas, perhaps you might have more insights into this.
I think you've explained it very well generally overall, and it is quite difficult, I think, to be able to break things down in a very, very concrete way, because the whole point of this approach and the whole reason that these applications are so successful and this very exploitative business model has become so successful is because people have really struggled to be able to define the dangers of it in very concrete terms. And most laws in the world, even the GDPR where it exists, they don't really capture the harm to society that you've touched upon, Demas. They talk a lot about individual rights. And Al, on an individual basis, you might be right saying, well, so what? Who cares, right? But if you extrapolate things by 1 million people, by 2 million people, and the effects of only being exposed to a very narrow segment of information or advertising or whatever the case may be, you can start to see how things can shift and how people can become polarized. I'll give you a good example. It's not necessarily from WhatsApp, but it's an example from YouTube. So if you go to YouTube, there's a lot of videos from anti-vaxxers, people who are against vaccines. And my wife and I recently, we had a baby and we vaccinated our baby, but we know people who are a bit skeptical about vaccines. And, when you have a baby, your instincts are really high. You just want to protect your child. You want to do what's best for your child. And if people have a natural skepticism of vaccines and they're a little bit worried, they're not quite sure whether they should or shouldn't vaccinate their children because they've heard rumors that it might cause autism or it might cause them harm in some way. And they go to YouTube and they search for, information on vaccines. The likelihood is they're going to start getting all these videos from these anti-vax groups, which are misinformation and just absolute nonsense, essentially, based on false science. But the more that they click those videos, the more that the YouTube algorithm will start to introduce them to other conspiracy theories, because the way that the algorithms work is that they group these issues together. So all of a sudden, you'll start to hear, you start out with vaccines, and then before you know it, there's misinformation on antibiotics or on something else or whatever the case may be.
The problem is an AI problem. Is that it's the fact that it's not Facebook doing it, but it's the fact that AI is an idiot essentially.
No, it's not even an AI problem. It's the AI is designed by people. There's no such thing, in my view, as an AI problem. There's just human problems reflected in AI. The problem is the very exploitative economic model, because all of this is basically designed to keep you online for longer, expose you to more ads, generate more revenue. That's the business model. With WhatsApp, I think we should be under no illusion that what's going on with the current terms and conditions, building on what Demas and said earlier, and Linda, is, this is digital coercion. What they're doing, they're forcing you to accept terms and conditions for a platform that they know the vast majority of the population uses to conduct its business, to keep in touch with loved ones, to engage in political activism, to engage with their local political representatives, in countries where there's very little other infrastructure which is available to the public in the same way that WhatsApp is. So this becomes a public policy issue at that point, because it might have started out a few years ago as just an innocent purchase of a company and just one messaging service amongst many messaging services. But the reality is, as we've heard and as we know, in India, in many parts of Africa, in many parts of South America, in parts of the Middle East, WhatsApp is a lifeline for those who are engaged in political struggles for their freedom, for those who don't really have a voice, and the only way that they can be near their political representatives is to engage through these WhatsApp groups. So by fundamentally...
that's exactly where we're coming from here, because of the fact that it's so prevalent and we are all using it and it's part of us. And you can see that Bonyo on the chat is asking, so do I update as prompted? And will that mean that I have accepted the new terms and conditions? And I think I would add there. And so what does that mean? Because what she wants to do is to just get back into WhatsApp and tell everybody that she has left. And then, but if she has accepted the terms and conditions, if she uninstalls WhatsApp, does it stay on our phone? What should she do? Like, if you are to break it down into the very basic. Well, Demas, what should Wambui do?
First of all, ever since the announcement was made, I think in the first week, I think almost 70 million people moved from WhatsApp to Telegram and Signal. But be that as it may, you realize that this was a calculated move, and perhaps they were ready to, for that hit anyway, and their business model would still thrive no matter what. But after that happened, they moved the date of implementation by a few months, which means that they actually care about the subject matters. Are we really customers, or are we subject matters? That's a matter for another day. So I think the first step is literacy on digital rights and data protection. That is what has been missing so much, whereby someone says that if I have nothing to hide, then why do I care what information is out there, or the government already has all the information about me? Or and for me, it's usually like someone saying that I don't care about freedom of speech because I have nothing to say. So it begins with education. And I think this is what we are trying to do with this discussion right now. For my organization, is that we have almost totally switched to another platform, especially when discussing our sensitive things. But I realize that most people are still in WhatsApp anyway. And which begs the question, exactly what are we supposed to do? There's a segment that actually, as Thomas said, has no option but to stay in WhatsApp. for political organizing, for their own struggles. And that is actually the argument that should be heightened, especially in this international forums and international initiatives to protect certain rights, because we are, I mean, the rights of the weakest in society are lost within these arguments when other people have options. I'm trying to imagine if I was in Gaza right now and certain sets of communication that might actually save my life are removed because the person who has the power can't remove it. And I'm trying to think about what legal protection, what legal regimes can be implemented to ensure that that doesn't happen.
But you know, the big thing that we are hoping to think about here in this particular conversation is from an individual standpoint, from the perspective of me. I mean, government has a role to play, and Linda, I'm going to ask you to answer the question about what is the role of the question that James has asked about what is the role of the ODPC in all of this. But you know, ultimately, the big conversation that we are hoping to have here is to really ring fence the conversation around me as an individual. What does this mean for me, and what can I do about it? Kat, I see that you've had your hand up for a few minutes. I'm going to allow you to jump in and ask a question.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Kat from the Lawyers Hub, and I have a question for Linda as she answers her question. So you can see that governments like India are able to control what WhatsApp does in their country, because I think India has a large population of people, and when it comes to like this privacy policy, the government was able to actually stand up and say, we don't want you to implement this, and please tell us why you have different regulations for the EU and different regulations for India. So my question is, do you think that as Africa, we need to then think about ourselves as a regional bloc which controls a large or significant amount of market? Sorry. I think I broke off for a minute, but my question is, do you think that we need to broaden the base of what we consider a market so that then we could have power against big tech companies? That's my first question. And then the second question is, because they're collecting data
Sorry, I'm not sure whether it's just me, but we may have lost Kat.
I think we've lost her. I can't hear her.
Okay, but I think the question is fundamentally, Linda, understood. What's the role of the ODPC? Grace Bonyo adds on to that question to you that if this is a public policy issue, who should we go and ask? Is it the ODPC? Is it the CSICT? Should we go to court? Do we come together and protest? And if so, how? So would you just address yourself to all of these thoughts? Because we are trying to really get to Sasa Mimi Nidu.
Okay. I think in terms of recourse, I would say this. I have a friend in Nigeria. He's called Olumide Babalola. I like the organization, the Digital Rights Lawyers Initiative. They do some crazy stuff like sue companies that don't even work in Africa. They want to sue TikTok. And so it seems like the moment companies are sued, they will figure out local counsel who will go in and defend them. I don't think we're seeing those big, public interest cases in Kenya yet. There's the cases that are happening within the tech policy space have been between governments and bloggers, the government and bloggers. And we haven't seen actually, citizens exerting their rights against private companies. I think this would have been a really great test case to see how this could go. So I think that can be one.
We can sue Facebook here.
Sorry?
Do you mean to say that we can sue Facebook here in Kenya?
Yeah. I think the public policy, especially the East African public policy team would have something to respond to. So that's one of the options that we may have. I've gone through the privacy policy for WhatsApp, and I just can't see a recourse. Like, internally, if Facebook deletes my WhatsApp account, how do I appeal? And maybe if my fellow panelists have read that, I'd be happy to be schooled. And this is a concern because I think from the US elections, we saw the banning of Trump from social media platforms, and Facebook had put together the Facebook Oversight Board, which Oversight Board just recently started to consider the Donald Trump issue being suspended from Facebook, and they gave the CEO Mark Zuckerberg another 6 months to figure out whether Donald Trump will be reinstated on the platform or not. So essentially, all these decisions may still rest on the CEO Mark to make these particular determinations. So I think in terms of internal mechanisms in which this can be fixed, because WhatsApp will now be a Facebook company, then I think that for me is still lacking. But then I like Bomu's question on the public interest issue and the role of the data commissioner in this. I think the example that has been given, I think, by Kate on the different jurisdictions and how they're handling WhatsApp. It's impossible to handle big tech companies as one single country. The discussions that have now been I think happening under the Africa Free Trade Agreement is to look at treating Africa as one data market in which data can flow within within the continent, without any sort of restrictions, but then treat it as, data going into foreign jurisdictions if it's leaving the continent. I'm not sure that's going to happen as fast as it should in the circumstances. And then two, the working groups, I think under the African Union on this data protection issues is just not working. We have an association, I think there's an association of data commissioners across the continent that are speaking to each other, but not ideally cooperating enough to handle big tech as one common enemy in that sense. So I think it's great on paper to talk about Africa handling this as one force, but it's ideally not happening. Even the laws that we have are mostly borrowed from GDPR, and it's not looking at what's our context and what would ideally happen in this case. So I think the best we could do is to petition. How do we petition the cabinet secretary to intervene, as well as the data commissioner to intervene? But Demas said something so important about, do we actually have the teeth to bite into big tech companies? I'm not sure we have that yet. We can give it a try and dig into the tail, but I'm not sure we're going to bring it down as soon as we can. The population, and this is my last comment on this, I think the population in India and Brazil has sort of helped to, have them negotiate with tech companies, even for WhatsApp. Facebook tried to bring WhatsApp payments to Brazil. The central bank suspended it. And so that was, I think, last year. And so we saw actually that, a regulator can look at the monetary aspects of something and then, gets to rein in on it. India as well has had those same negotiations because of the population. And WhatsApp is looking to, and like other big tech companies, they look to big markets like ours to test, big populations like India and Africa to test a particular product. If that product works, they take it back to the West when it's refined, and then they do it on them, especially on products that actually ideally affect democracy. So I don't have a great answer for that question, but I think in writing, in opinion pieces, even though this thing is kicking off on Monday, we actually have not seen people writing about this in mainstream media in Kenya. So I think any role that we could play in teaching the public and engaging regulators and telling them, I think this is your role. And my finally is on antitrust. I think the angle that was taken in India was the antitrust angle and saying it's actually not great for competition to allow you as a WhatsApp company to do this and this. So I think the role of competition authorities across the continent should also be found up to look at what are competition authorities doing in terms of reining in on big tech, so that even if they're taking this data for business reasons, then we need to regulate, that those sort of new business models built around data. And if WhatsApp is using our data for business, there's been discussions around how do we benefit from monetizing our data? Can you pay me for using my data if you make money from it? I think those are some of the stuff that we could demand for.
Thank you so much. We literally within 3 minutes before time goes. So I'm going to ask Demas, I'm going to spotlight you now. And I'm going to ask you to speak specifically to civil society organizations. You're facing the camera and you're speaking straight to civil society organizations. What should civil society organizations do tomorrow when the, day after tomorrow, when the WhatsApp terms and conditions come into effect? What can civil society organizations on the ground do to help people protect themselves or to help people know at least what is going
on? Typically, civil society, first of all, does research and then engages duty bearers and rights holders. In this case, we need to engage the Office of the Data Protection Commissioner to, first of all, speak to certain blatant violations that would be there in the new regulations. For example, on withdrawing consent, how does that look? How does that look like when the law actually requires data handlers and data processors to be able to facilitate the withdrawal of consent? That is one. The other thing is to continue the fight of educating the public on the issue of data and how data is becoming more and more important as the modes of collection and processing continue to expand exponentially. The information that WhatsApp or Facebook or Google that has about me, Google, for example, sends information from my phone to the cloud about every 15 seconds. It means that this is a company that potentially knows everything. And when I say everything, I mean everything about me, to the level of my beliefs, and sometimes I think even to my health status in terms of whether I walk enough and things like that. And when we do that is when now we can bring the pressure from the ground up, and the government will listen to us and come up with ways in which we can be protected from big tech. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm going to spotlight you, Tom. And Tom, I'm going to ask you to speak specifically to government officials. Not just in Kenya, but government officials everywhere. What are the things that they need to pay attention to where this is concerned, so that they can protect their people? And I want you to speak directly to them and say, so what do you think government officials directly should do, starting Saturday or even before?
I think it's very hard to speak to government officials, generally speaking, because there are so many different interests at play. In America, for the government officials there, it's generally in their interest to allow this business model to continue, because it's American firms which have made enormous amounts of money off the back of this business model, and they pay taxes in the US. If they pay taxes at all, it's there. So it's in America's interest. But if I was speaking to government officials in Africa, which is the focus of this discussion, whether in Kenya or elsewhere, I would say to them, in many countries now, there are data protection laws, either that have just been passed, that have been updated, or that are in the making. Many of those replicate some of the provisions of GDPR, which are designed to protect individual rights. I would ask that they, look at the ways in which those laws can be used to counter the power of these companies. As we've heard, Africa is a huge market for WhatsApp. At the moment, it's splintered into 50-something different markets in all the different countries. But I honestly think that there's a huge amount of potential in the Africa Free Trade Agreement to establish an African single digital market that follows the model of the European one, but is specific for the context in Africa. The Europeans have massive bargaining power here, and they've been able to block the terms and conditions being rolled out in Europe because of that bargaining power through the digital single market. Africa is perfectly primed to do the same thing. I also think that Linda's point on strategic litigation is absolutely crucial. Sometimes you have to sue, and that's okay. You know, as lawyers, nobody takes that personally. You just represent your client and you do the work. It doesn't, you know, it's not a personal attack. It's just upholding the law and representing interests. The other thing I would say is, you know, individual data protection commissioners and offices are able to engage with these companies directly. If the Kenyan DPO were to send a letter to Facebook asking for an explanation as to what this would mean for Kenyan citizens and why they're doing it, I think it would force Facebook to engage. And I think it's perfectly legitimate for Kenyan citizens to also ask their DPO to do that. One final note I would make, which is to citizens and individuals directly, you know, ultimately it's your decision whether you want to update the terms and conditions. Personally, I have, because I have to keep contact with certain groups, but at the same time, I've also downloaded Signal, and to the extent that I can, I'm moving my communications over to Signal. The other thing that I've done personally is I don't have a Facebook account, I don't have an Instagram account, so I limit Facebook's ability to be able to cross-reference different types of data about me. So have a careful think about the platforms you use the most, what makes most sense to you, and also think about whether you really need Facebook and Messenger and Instagram and WhatsApp. If you can delete 2 of those 4, you've already cut in half the amount of data which Facebook controls about you. Thanks.
Thank you so much. And there you have it. I think that was a really interesting conversation. I'm careful to let people go off to the rest of their day. It's 1 o'clock. The most important thing that I guess we should say is that it's a very conscious decision as to whether or not you allow yourself to get involved, and whether or not you allow yourself to be tracked by these companies. Signal, there are options for those of us that care to go and look for them, like Signal and so on and so forth. But unfortunately, the reality on the ground is that my grandmother, my mom, my aunt in the village and so on are not going to work very hard to go into Signal unless WhatsApp either shuts down or fails. So we all have a responsibility to try and raise our voice and to try and make sure that people like the ODPC do contact Facebook and do try and understand what that might mean for the rest of us. With that, I'm going to say thank you so much to all of you for having attended this conversation. It's been recorded and it's going to be edited and uploaded. I think the broadcast somewhere failed at one point, so we're going to make sure that the whole of it is put together and re-uploaded so that you have access to it. Thank you very much for all the wonderful questions and for being here to make it happen. Specific thank you to Linda, to Demas, to Tom for the time that you've taken to break this down. I know that you all had to go and read a little bit and sort of research a little bit so that you can be able to educate us. And you've done a really good job to help us to understand it at the local level. So with that, thank you everyone, and I wish you the best of days. Have a good one.
Bye-bye, thanks.
Thanks, Al. Thanks, everyone.